Okay, gonna get started. Hello, my name is Courtney Cassidy, and I am an interdisciplinary artist as well as the interim executive director at the Center for Art Tapes. We'll also be referring to it as CFAT tonight. For those who may not know CFAT, we support artists working in media technologies by providing subsidized public access to professional equipment, facilities, technical expertise, educational resources, mentorship, and other forms of professional and creative support. We're located at 2238 Maitland Street in Halifax, and you can learn more about us by checking out our website or sending me an email. We will be getting into housekeeping notes shortly, but I'd like to say for now that we are grateful to be joined by Ayoka and Carmel. They will be providing ASL interpretations this evening. Participants who wish to view the ASL interpreters can view our speakers in the gallery view. And we'll ask that folks joining us today please turn off their camera while myself and Julie and our panelists are in conversation, so as to not compete with Ayoka and Carmel's videos. During the questions and discussion period, we can have videos on if it feels comfortable and safe for you to do so. It's so much nicer when we can speak to people's faces, and we hope you join us in video sharing if you'd like.
Okay, hello. I would like to introduce myself to everyone. My name is Julie Hollenbach. I am an assistant professor in the Division of Art History and Contemporary Culture at NSCAD University. I am glad and grateful to be here and grateful for the invitation, for CFAT's invitation to help facilitate this wonderful speaker series. We regret to inform you. More on the speaker series in just a moment. So many of us living across Turtle Island, or what is currently called North America, are privileged to gather today, albeit virtually, from where we live on ancestral and traditional Indigenous territories. I join you from where I live and work as an uninvited guest on Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation. The treaties of peace and friendship signed in the 1700s governed this territory. They were signed between the Mi'kmaq, the Maliseet, and the Wolastoqiyik with the British Crown. These treaties didn't cede land or title or relinquish ways of life. Instead, the treaties of peace and friendship outlined a covenant that was intended to guide peaceful coexistence between neighbors who committed in these treaties to live alongside one another respectfully. The treaty promised that the British Crown and its subjects would honor Mi'kmaq rights to their traditional practices and ways of life. We know from history that the Crown and then the Canadian government has not upheld its obligations and commitments to this treaty. Generations of Indigenous elders and activists have worked to disrupt colonialism, to challenge state power, and to contest the ongoing erasure of Indigenous sovereignty. This land acknowledgement is resultant from their powerful work and teachings. To those among you who are Indigenous, I acknowledge you as the rightful caretakers and keepers of this land and all the lands across Turtle Island from where those of you may be joining us. I hope that in our conversation today, we can each be grounded in an awareness of our individual and specific places and locations and our responsibility to uphold treaties and be present and aware as guests and neighbors. How are we showing up as treaty people to stop ongoing state and settler violence where we live and across Turtle Island, to demand that Canada uphold its treaty obligations to honor and respect Indigenous sovereignty? So resources providing more information about ways to support Indigenous resistance here in Mi'kma'ki will be shared in the chat in just a second. Oh, there it is. Thanks, Courtney.
And we'd also like to acknowledge the history of African Nova Scotians on this land and what it means for an organization like the Center for Art Tapes to be situated in Halifax's central north end, an area that has historically been home to African Nova Scotian families. This last Saturday was a rally organized by Africville survivors, their descendants, and their supporters, calling for reparations for the wrongful destruction of Africville and the dispossession and displacement of its community. This movement for compensation and reparations has been ongoing for decades and is picking up steam. If you'd like to learn more about Saturday's action and the movement, please follow the link I will be posting momentarily in the chat to an article published by the Nova Scotia Advocate over the weekend. And throughout this presentation and in all of CFAT's programming and operations, we wish to acknowledge the history of this land and the ways in which our organization can best serve and collaborate with the many arts communities in Mi'kma'ki. We are all treaty people. So I am pleased to welcome you to the third and final of 3 virtual discussions, part of the speaker series We Regret to Inform You, hosted by CFAT. We Regret to Inform You is a series of talks that considers our ideas around success and failure in the arts. We are very grateful to have been approached by Julie for this collaboration. Thank you, Julie. The series aims to decenter narratives of success in Western art worlds and cultural practice. Oftentimes at talks, and artists will center their experiences of success, highlighting successful projects and all the things in their practice that has worked. What is oftentimes so precious and so rarely talked about is what happens when things don't go as planned. Setbacks and failure are normal, everyday occurrences that are a fundamental and sometimes generative part of creative practice. The hope here is to create community conversations that destigmatize failure, which can look like setbacks, dead ends, rejection from grants or exhibition proposals, taking a break, blockage, impasse, and on and on. We Regret to Inform You will critically consider success stories and the myth that everyone can achieve success in a colonialist, white supremacist, neoliberal, capitalist society. In this discussion, we hope to critically assess the cultural systems that fail so many folks while giving complexity to the myriad experiences that exist in the arts. In this final event for the discussion series, we'll be chatting with 3 different people who have all participated in CFAT's Media Art Scholarship Program, which is our flagship program currently in its 33rd year. The program is a rigorous 6-month education and mentorship opportunity for emerging artists in our community who submit a proposal to make a media art project in a medium in which they have little to no previous experience. And then scholars are paired up with mentors in our community and attend weekly skills-based workshops while they create their project. The program always ends with a final exhibition of the scholar's artwork, which often has been the first opportunity for the participants in the program to professionally exhibit their work. I will be sharing as well in the chat a link to learn more about the program if you'd like.
So a little bit of content disclosure and heads up. Today's discussion may touch on histories and contemporary experiences of systemic oppression, including racism, specifically institutional racism and Islamophobia, misogyny, homophobia, and ableism. If at any point during our presentation you feel distressed or uncomfortable, please check in with yourself, take a break. Taking a break can mean turning off your camera and mic, or turning off your screen and muting your speakers, stepping away, look out a window, drink some water, grab a snack, pet your cat. And if you feel able to come back and join us, please do so. But if not, please take good care of yourself. So some Zoom housekeeping points before we begin our discussion. Just a note that this talk is being recorded. So anything that happens on the screen or any volume like voiced comments will be part of that recording, but things that are typed in the chat will not be. So for that reason, Courtney and I will read any questions or comments in the chat so that they can kind of be captured in the video. Also a reminder that please keep your mic and your video off during the panelists' presentations. However, when it's question time or the discussion period, if you'd like to say or be seen, we really welcome you to jump back on camera and mic. And if you have any questions that you'd like to ask our panelists in the discussion period following the presentation, please feel welcome to enter them in the chat field, and we can kind of like start creating a little record of those there.
And if you feel comfortable doing so, please feel free to include your pronouns next to your name. You can do so by right-clicking on your little thumbnail in the Zoom gallery. And lastly, we'll just ask that you care for yourself and others. We will reserve the right to ask anyone to leave this space if there's any type of discrimination, violent acts, or behavior that makes others feel unsafe or uncomfortable. There will be multiple moderators in the Zoom room tonight. I will be one of them, and our programming coordinator, Jesse Mitchell, will be the other. Please feel free to privately message us if anything's not feeling okay for you.
Great. Okay, so now to the bio section and then the discussion. So today we're going to engage in a panel-like conversation with, as Cortney mentioned, for like participants of CFAT's Media Art Scholarship. So as a sort of like, where are they now discussion, oftentimes these programs will include artist talks during the program, but then there is sometimes not follow-up. And it's kind of nice to hear how people progress and how things grow. So that's what this is. So in just a second, I'll read out everybody's bios, and then following that, people are going to speak. Tara, Charvel, and Kaz are going to speak for themselves and introduce themselves and show you a few images about their practice and their current work. And then we'll move into a group discussion exploring ideas around professionalism, how to take care of ourselves in the face of setbacks, what it means to be working in community, and how our notions of the art world can shift and become demystified over time. So first up is Tara Taylor. So Tara is the artistic director at the Charles Taylor Theatre and Media Arts Association and the festival director for the Emerging Lens Cultural Film Festival, which is in its 10th year. Tara is also a playwright, a filmmaker, an actress, a visual artist, as well as a resin artist and a singer. She is the vice chair of Women in Film and Television, a board member for Screen Nova Scotia, a member of AFCOOP, as well as the Bus Stop Theatre and the Center for Art Tapes. Tara has produced, and in some cases starred in, Dreamgirls, The Color Purple, The Wiz, and the first original Viola Desmond, the musical. In production right now are two originals entitled Hood Habits, the Musical, and Love, Peace, and Hair Grease, under the Playwrights Unit, so Eastern Front Theatre. Tara participated in the CFAT Media Art Scholarship Program in 2006 and 2007. So throw up a little like appreciation emoji reaction for Tara. So the next person that I'm introducing is Charvel Rappos, who is an interdisciplinary artist, facilitator, and community organizer living and working in Chipuktuk, Halifax. Her work exploits the everyday as a force against itself. Charvel participated in the CFAT Media Art Scholarship Program in 2017 and 2018. So again, throw up your favorite reactionary emoji and welcome Charvel. And last but absolutely not least, Kaashif Ghanie is a ceramic artist and potter who lives and works in Halifax, but is originally from London, Ontario. In 2016, Ghanie received his Bachelor of Fine Arts in Ceramics from the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design University, as well as receiving a minor in art history. Ghanie's studio practice is a combination of commercial pottery that incorporates Islamic patterns, while the other half is his fine art ceramics, which takes traditional Islamic forms and motifs to analyze Islamophobic practices. Cass participated in the CFAT Media Scholarship Program last year in 2019 and 2020. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. Please throw up your favorite reactionary emoticon. Thank you. Okay, so welcome panelists. Thank you so much for being here this evening. It is a tremendous event, occasion, and honor to be speaking with you all about your practices and about the intersections of success and failure and how oftentimes the two are very linked with each other. And we don't really talk about failure as much as we talk about success. And that's kind of something that we're here to do, to sort of shed light on some of the darker parts that make it all possible. So I think what we're going to do is go in the order of Tara, Charvel, and then Cass. So the order that we just introduced everybody, and they're going to speak for themselves and introduce themselves and show some images of their work. Okay, Tara, you're up.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Courtney, for inviting me to be a part of this panel. It's beautiful. As you see on the screen, it's television. That's I have 3 partners that I created this production company with. So our aim for this company is basically to be a BIPOC version of CBC. And the Emerging Lens Cultural Film Festival, like you heard, is a film festival for BIPOC focus, not BIPOC only. We love our multicultural filmmakers. We love that rainbow of folks. Yeah, you can move along. So these are a few of the images from the first 2. Hood Habits are my musical. That it's basically about the inner city, kids in the inner city in Toronto. It's based on a graphic novel that's already written. It's an 84-page graphic novel, and I was just asked to create a musical of that 84-page graphic novel. And so it's been 2 years in the making. It had 2 script readings already. So hopefully, after COVID crazy, it will be on the stage. And next is Love, Peace, and Hair Grease, a musical that's, as you heard, under the Playwrights Unit. And I encourage anybody who has an interest in writing for theater to hit up PARC, Playwrights Atlantic Resource Center. They were my start and helped me along quite a bit. And the last image I painted that's one of my works, I Needed to Survive. That actually, I sold that down in the States somewhere. I can't remember, I think it was Atlanta somewhere. I just kind of said, here you go. And I haven't even actually staged it in Canada. Wrote that with my aunt. So this is another one of my practices. I love, love, love working with resin and polymer clay. So on the left, you'll see it's just, I'm not sure if how many people are familiar with clay, but when you create pattern work, we call them canes. So you just roll a bunch of colors together and you chop them. It looks like kind of like a candy cane. And so when you chop them up, you'll see different patterns, and I like to lay them out and that kind of thing. So that's one of my favorite ones. The one on the right, I sold that to an art dealer in Ottawa. So this one's called Safari. And the first one, I can't remember what it's called. It just looks really pretty. It looks like Jamaica. It reminds me of Jamaica. I was married to a Jamaican at that time. And this is just a few examples of my resin art. Way back when East Coast Lifestyle started out, I just loved their logo so much and was really inspired by the owner, the creator's story. I just created a whole bunch of works, and I was always too shy to present them to them. So this is one in the picture just belongs to me. I'm not allowed to put it out there because the logo doesn't belong to me. But I also right now teach a bunch of youth to create resin jewelry. The one in the middle is crochet, just crochet bangles. My grandma passed away about 5 years ago, and all I got was a crochet blanket, and I looked at it, it was in a bunch of squares, and it just inspired me to create some crochet jewelry that was a little bit of a modern touch on her lovely old lady squares, I call them. That's probably bad. And the last one on the right is I like to do some of my resin pieces. I like to do put logos in them. So this is Trev's Clothing. He has a very popular line around the city. Actually, I think it's gaining national attention. But yeah, so I'm working with him to create just a jewelry line for his logo. And next, I also am a oil artist. My medium of favorite for canvas is oil. And the one on the left, if you notice, it looks like a tear on under her eye, and that was a mistake. And I gave it to my mom, and she's like, "Yeah, so what were you feeling like when you painted this painting?" And so I just left it there. It was not a tear. I think I just kind of overdid. I dropped some water on it when I was like mixing it up and stuff. So yeah, that's not a mistake, or it's a mistake, but I just left it. So it looks like she's quite sad. The one on the right is resin. It's a pour painting. So it's pour painting, and then I just cover it in resin, and I like to use transparency. So you'll just notice the butterflies there. yeah, just a little favorite thing. I like to mix mediums a lot. I think that's it.
Thanks so much, Tara. That's like really lovely. It's lovely to see your work and to have visuals to accompany descriptions.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I forgot about the video. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm just gonna pull up the video.
Oh, okay. So this is the video. I didn't create the video. I got pulled that from YouTube, but the song I wrote, that's I just like the video because it speaks to my song. So for Love, Peace, and Hair Grease, I wrote a promo, the opening number. It's called Fix Your Hair. So this is just a chorus. Fix your hair. Afros beware. Go fix your hair. Afros beware. Go fix your hair. Afros beware. Go fix your hair. Afros beware. Thank you.
Thank you, Tara. That's awesome.
Hey, gang. Welcome back.
Charvel, you're up.
Hi. So the pictures that I have up are from a residency that I did over the summer at Eye Level, which is an artist-run center in the city. And over the past couple of years, I've been working mainly in publishing zines, and this was something that half the project was a zine, and then the other half of the project was a graphic score. And the project itself was based on a project that me and a friend of mine had been working on, and he passed away. So it was kind of this heavy project, but yeah, I have now 2 zines from it, and then there's also like a musical composition based on the graphic score online. So the next couple of images are just pages that were taken from the zine. And the zine itself was kind of a process-based piece where over the month that I spent at Eye Level, I was writing and drawing and kind of processing this event that had happened, and then took all of those things and cut them up and collaged them. And then, so those are the pages that you're seeing now. And then the next image is part of the graphic score that I wrote. So the one on the left side is the entire thing from start to finish. And the way that it was kind of transcribed into music was that I gave 11 of my friends and my friends who passed away's friends pieces of this, and then I asked them to improvise using this segment that I had given them. So what you see on the right is more of a condensed version of just a specific section of the score. Yeah, so that's kind of what the last big project that I was working on is. And otherwise, right now I'm in school for carpentry and am doing some less large projects, but I'm focusing on just working on drawing and maybe working on an animation coming up. But yeah, that's kind of an intro of what I've been working on.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing. Those images were really like provocative and lovely. Cass.
Hey everybody, I'm Ghanie. I'd first like to thank Julie and CFAT for having me here. It's good to talk about things. And I'm a ceramic artist and potter, like was said. I own a ceramic company where I make functional pottery with my partner, Kate Gray. We do like a whole line of different works, generally commercial things and some bigger things. And then I have my own artist practice where I take content of like specific iconography, like in carpets and stuff like that, nostalgic Islamic prayer rugs, and try to recontextualize them and make them into either installations or pieces that have a little bit more content to talk about political themes and Islamophobia and stuff. This piece specifically, I did this, so if you imagine, it's kind of like a 4 foot by 8 foot large wall mounted piece where it was done at the Center for Craft, and it was then shown at the Mary Black Gallery, where I took a family rug and I kind of recontextualized it into dinnerware, and the piece is called Serving Dinner Not War. And it's kind of looking at the idea of warfare in the sense that, you know, there's a term where it's called carpet bombing. So I'm kind of like connecting the ideas of like warfare, carpet, and let's serve dinner rather than, you know, go to war and stuff like that. So there was that piece. And then the next one. So this is also tied in together with that same sort of residency at the Center for Craft. This one dealt with more personal narrative of like my own issues with like racism and being marginalized, othered, and through Islamophobia and just other things. So each piece had a sort of narrative to them, and they were all had their own themes dealing with different types of oppression and so on and so forth. So this was done, and it was funded by Arts Nova Scotia, and I think I did that in around 2018, give or take. Yeah, and it was called Adaptation. So the whole premise of the work was, it's like I'm creating vessel, and it's been a theme throughout university where I would create vessels that are based off human forms, and then these pots that are represented by human forms would be kind of adaptating or mutating to kind of survive this new politically charged landscape. And then this is my CFAP project, or one of them that I did during my media arts scholarship last year. So my idea and what I struggled with, and I'll obviously talk about it more, was I found it really hard to communicate themes that in my work. So getting across what the narrative was. So you either had to read it or hear it from my mouth. So I kind of wanted to make a vessel that was intimate in the sense where you would become vulnerable by placing either your head or your ear and listening to an actual spoken narrative, almost like a poem, kind of like describing my feelings and like sort of anxieties and so on and so forth. So in this one specifically, you had to essentially put your head in the pod, and it's weird because it acted as almost like a womb. So you were enclosed, you couldn't hear the sound outside, and all you could hear was the narrative coming from the inside of the vessel. That's it.
Cool. Thank you so much. Thank you all for introducing yourselves and sharing with us some work. It's really lovely to see. Okay, let's start off our conversation this evening with kind of a very gentle, broad ease into our topic of discussion. So in whatever order you like, I would love to hear from you how failure is part of your practice. So whether that's sharing about a project that didn't go as planned, didn't go at all, or whether that's like the experience of navigating being rejected for grants or rejected for exhibitions or shows or other things that you've gone for.
I'll go. First, I look at failure now as milestones. That's kind of how I cope, and I reworded them for myself, because failure in one of, like, I guess like the very first major production that we put on was Dreamgirls, and the first failure, we didn't get the funding for it. It was just like, who are you? You come out of the crystal blue and you haven't done anything this major before, and that kind of feedback. And so that we cried for a little while. And what we had the rights to do also at that time was to perform some of the music. So we did put on like a gala type thing, just to fundraise, I guess, try to fundraise until we found out if we got the other grants to put on the full musical. And so we were successful in that, in both. So we put on like the little gala. We had the three ladies who played the Green Girls. One of them actually has passed on, rest her soul. And we did it at the now Doubletree. What, I can't remember what that was called before, Citadel or something, I forget. So we did it there, and then we were successful with the funding afterward. But we raised a lot of money from that. So like, again, that's why now I look at failures as milestones now, because if we hadn't did that, then I don't think we would have gotten as many people to come out to the actual thing, right? And so there was just more support because we were able to push it, and they heard the girls before they were actually in the full play, and so on and so forth. So I like to turn it around and look at it as like a learning thing.
Yeah, and that definitely, I imagine that's something that probably comes after the fact, right? Like after the initial feeling of blow and disappointment. And then like with like, how do we hold failure, or how do we keep ourselves strong? I'm wondering how you folks, like, what does self-care look like for you, or what is sort of your process of moving through failure look like for you?
Baking. I know one thing with my practice, it's so in like part of it, right, is intrinsic, because functional ceramics is really key on with like food and stuff like that. So if I'm ever having a really bad time in the studio or something like that, I love cooking. So that's my kind of like go-to outlet to kind of stimulate that other side of the creative brain, that where I don't have to like suffer in the studio.
Yeah, Kaz, I know that in our discussions leading up to tonight, you had also just talked about how ceramics means a lot of failure, like a lot of trial and error, right?
Oh, totally. I feel as though like I'm so well versed in failure now at this point. Sometimes things will work perfectly, or some things will totally go awry. And for me, I always aim to, if I'm doing a project, I aim to have more than one project. So in the sense, I'm working on two things at the same time. So if I mess up with one thing, I have the backup to kind of help facilitate the first thing.
I can kind of answer Julie's initial question. And maybe I'll just talk a bit about like what I kind of see failure as, because I think it's a pretty big part of my practice, just as it's a pretty big part of my life in general. And then maybe I'll tie in the project at eye level that I did a bit, because that definitely had some shortcomings. So when I think about failure, it's kind of just like this pervasive thing that is part of everything. So it's not only something that happens in life, but also in the art that I make. And just as it does, so does success. And I think they kind of go hand in hand. And it's not that it like moves from one to the other, like now I'm failing and now I'm succeeding, but rather they're kind of happening at the same time together. And in that way, it's really hard to separate for me when splitting it down the middle, where it's like I have more success than I do failure in this thing. Doesn't feel like a good gauge of how well something is doing or coming across. So it's kind of this like shape-shifting kind of thing that takes its cues from the world and how nature tends to work. And I like try to approach it in a way where I just can't fight it. I just have to let it happen. And the failure on my end comes from when I try to kind of like pin it down or decide or assume how things are. So when I see something, I'm like, that's a failure, and that means these specific things. Or if I look at a specific thing, it's something that I really try to work against. And so it's kind of like I fail when I try to control the situation or all of these things. And as part of my practice, I try to let things be unstable and inconsistent in a way. So in terms of the project I did at eye level, which when I had originally applied for the grant to do the residency, COVID still hadn't come. So my whole project, which was like very collaborative, COVID happened and I kind of had to reformulate the whole thing. And for me, the failure came in not taking the situation as what it was and just kind of ignoring that COVID was a thing and then trying to still do what I originally had set out to do and wasn't very intentional in changing the way that I was approaching it. So I found that because COVID meant that all of the people participating had to be socially distanced and we weren't able to sit down together, especially around a topic like death, it was a very challenging thing. And so when I came away from it, I saw that my intention and my attention wasn't really in adapting that, where it felt very like isolated and that I was doing this thing by myself for myself, when looking back on it, I wish that I was able to have brought people in a more, just in a different way, because it felt like it was kind of lacking in that. But there were also a lot of successes with the project, and part of that was almost like the same thing of like having all of these people together working on a specific thing. Yeah, so that's kind of my take on failure in my practice.
Thanks, Charvel. Thanks for sharing. I wanted to sort of pick up on a thread that Cortney introduced and ask how, in the face of failure, you take care of yourselves, how you move through it, how you process, if you have rituals that you do, or practices that become habit after dealing with so and so many rejections or failures.
I have a couple that I'd like to mention. So the first one kind of marries in self-care with what do I do after one. So I'm a fan of going out to Lawrencetown Beach in the daytime and very, very, very early evening, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I write out there. I listen to the water. I listen to the wind, everything. It calms me, and I need to be. It helps me come back to the land and just come back to myself. That's what I do to actually like create, as well as just for self-care and just forget everything around me. Also, I have a really, really cool, beautiful bunch of children and a big lawn. So every time well, summertime, well, actually, even now that it's cold, my kids don't care. We go and we dance and we perform on the lawn. When I'm having a bad day, I pull in, I put my head down at my wheel, take a deep breath, go into the house, and I say, does anybody want to come outside and play? And they're always willing to just be silly with me so I can just forget about some things and take a deep breath and deal with it after.
For me, I find that kind of making a distinction between self-care and the rest of my life is not something that I like to do. And, you know, because I want to be taking care of myself all the time. And the way that I find I do that is just like being present in the world. So that means I walk a lot, I stand and look a lot, and I sit and listen to things, and I try to be as intentional as I can when I'm doing specific things. So when I'm with people, I try to be with people, or if I'm making something, I'm trying to really focus on doing that thing. And it's not a thing that I feel like I can make a distinction between like, now I'm practicing self-care and now I'm not.
Can I ask you then, like, what, when you receive bad news or something doesn't go the way you want or something feels frustrating and crunchy, like, are there things that you either intentionally or just naturally do? Maybe not under the label of self-care.
Yeah, totally. It's the exact same thing. It's kind of like I go outside, I take long walks, I listen to music, I try to be around my friends, all of the same things that I do, but it's also kind of like looking for support from other people in like, I'm having a hard time, these are the things that are happening, and then doing those things together. But it feels like that process is the same for bad things as it is for good things or anything that's happening.
I definitely hear you with I think sometimes when we hear the term self-care, I know it's very trendy in certain circles. And so I do a similar thing of like, I don't know if I'm in self-care mode right now. But I think that like what you're talking about and what Charvel you had said in your last answer around like kind of like isolated, or maybe feeling like you had isolated a bit, or you had wished that you had invited people in more. I'm wondering, like, I know for me it's a hard thing to do, asking for help or asking for support, especially following like a rejection or leading up to an application or deadline. And I'm wondering if any of you folks know what that looks like for you, like asking for help, or is that a thing that you do?
Asking, so I'm kind of really lucky in the sense that my partner also practices ceramics as well. So because of that, when something totally goes wrong, I can lean on her and we can usually bump our heads to kind of like figure out when things do go wrong. And if things absolutely go wrong and there's no help and that sort of thing, and we can't figure it out together, then the nice thing about the craft community and the ceramics community in Nova Scotia, it's really nice because we kind of get together and we kind of problem solve. So if you don't have something and you need some help and there's somebody out there who can actually help you, you knock on their door or give them a text, and most of the time we work things out together. And like without that support, like I don't know what I would do.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm the same way. I found it really, really hard for a lot of years to ask for help, extremely hard because I'm the oldest child in my family. I'm a single parent, so I'm daddy and mommy. So I have to take care of a lot of folks in my circles, and including like we work with emerging folks, so I'm caring for them. And so I always weirdly felt like it was selfish to ask for help. Like, what, how do I need, why do I need help? Everyone sees you as the one who can get this or get that or do this or do your productions or do this. I'm like, no, sometimes I just need a little help. And so the way that I've kind of turned that around for myself is I have two one organization, one individual that actually asked me to mentor them. So like all of my mistakes, I pass along and I say, listen, when you're writing a grant, the best thing to do is this, the best thing to do is that, da, 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 da. And then if you happen to get turned down, then da, 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 da. And then in turn, because they're kind of in the similar practices as myself, they're able to help me. So now I have them to lean on for, you know, if I need help. So I just kind of like, I guess my way of asking for help is educating and like bringing people into my fold so we can create this group. And so an easy way to describe that too is when I mentioned that I teach youth resin art. I actually told them like I was always afraid to show my resin work, and I wanted to ask for help to, you know, for someone to help me get out there. And because I now teach them, they're like, oh, well, you know, at the end of the course, when we make things, let's all do a gallery show together, and that way, well, you'll have us to show with you. So it's just, I just love leaning on like other folks, especially youth. Oh my gosh, they're better than me, but they're so brave. So that's kind of a way that I've turned it around in my circles.
Tara, I want to follow up with you in a second, but Charvel, if you wanted to speak on that, I want to give you an opportunity to do so.
Yeah. It actually feels quite, I mean, it's not easy because I think I also have a history of not asking for help when I need it, but the more time that I spend thinking about this, because I think about it a lot, the more I think about how many people around me also need help a lot of the times, and with a spectrum of different things. And I know that if I'm not doing well or not taking care of myself, then I can't do or provide that kind of help for the people around me. So it's like it's both like a selfish thing in that I'm like, when I need something, I know that I need to, and I need it from someone else, then I'm going to ask for it if I can. But also just like taking care of the people around me as best I can.
Thank you for that. I really love that idea that, you know, when we can't take care of others or help others if we're not taking care of ourselves. So touching or like leading off from that, and also Tara, something that you were sharing, this idea of like community, and Tara, you used the word emerging, like emerging artists, supporting emerging artists. And this idea that we're all kind of on this continuum of emerging or professional, or like what even is that? I think we'll get into that in a little bit. But I wanted to ask, you know, I think when we start, we have ideas of what professional cultural practice, arts practice is. And then only through doing do we learn what it is. And so I'm wondering if like artistic practice broadly is what you thought it would be. And if you could talk a little bit about how what it is or what you feel it is has changed over the course of your practice, and how it's been demystified for you. It's a bit of a lot, but maybe talk about like, is it what you thought it would be? How has it been demystified?
I think the best way I can probably like maybe describe this is or like at least how I interpreted it. Initially when I went to university, I never thought I would be in ceramics. So going from like a sculpture conceptual mind to a craft mind wasn't a huge jump, but it was still a little bit of a jump. But then taking on craft in ceramics, I kind of had to become a jack of all trades. So learning how to like, you know, repair things, learning how to build things that I wouldn't normally have to do, right? So yeah, I think that I kind of lost my train of thought now, but yeah.
Wow. That's a question. I think for me, Can you ask that again, Julie, just so I had a train.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
So like my question is broadly thinking that, you know, between emerging and professional and established,
Mhm.
we have to ask for help and receive mentorship. And then as we gain experience, we help others and we mentor others. And what strikes me, or what struck me as you all were talking, was this idea that like practice isn't often what we think it is.
Mhm.
And when we think it's something when we start, because we get started and we get into it, and then after a while, it turns into something else, or you know, the veil kind of lifts from our eyes and practice becomes demystified, or we live in our own reality. So yeah, I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah. So when I was 18, I applied to NASCAD. And my mom said, NASCAD, what does that stand for? So I told her, and she said, there's no money in art. You better go do something else. And I did. And I regretted that. I love my mom. I'm sure she didn't mean any harm. It's just, you don't see many painters that are millionaires unless they're dead. So I basically I think over time, I saw the artist in me incorporated in all that I was doing. So, I mean, I was drawing at work, when I took civil engineering too, and I was starting to create in AutoCAD, I was drawing with AutoCAD and I was doing all these things. And in a couple of courses I took, they would say, can we portray A, B, C, and D? And I would do it in video form, or this kind of thing. And like one time it was Halloween and the class said, oh, let's come and be best dressed. There's a contest for best dressed. Well, oh my goodness, I won it because I went elaborate. I looked like a Victorian princess from the Sahara. And I mixed the two. So it's just everything that I did that wasn't my practice. Over time I found myself, I was doing a little bit of it, a little bit of it, a little piece of me. So I realized it's me. That's just who I am. So what the heck am I doing? And so I just said, to heck with it all. I've been a full-time artist for 2 years now, proudly. And I said, Mom, I'm making more money than I did when I was in other traditional jobs. And she's got a smile on her face now, so she doesn't care what I do, as long as I can pay my own rent.
Um, uh, I don't know if I had any ideas about what those distinctions meant, like before, between being like professional or emerging. I still had no idea. Like I feel like I am just doing things, and I I don't know if I can put a name to what I'm doing. It's like sometimes I have a project idea and there's a grant available that seems like it would be a good fit. And so I choose to do that because that means that I can support myself in that. But I don't think that I want to, and I'm not like bashing doing this at all, but writing grants and living and making money from doing that is maybe something that I'm interested in doing, because I think that it can alter, and it has in the past when I've done residencies, has altered the way that I approach doing my art and can make things feel dishonest in a way that I don't exactly like. And the one thing that I have learned from doing residencies is uh, that life and dealing with people can sometimes be really difficult and horrible. And, that brings its own challenges. And I think that living as an artist who is working specifically like through grants and residencies and that form of doing that, like that can come out for sure. And like I think there are definitely like great ways to go about it, and if that is a way that you can see yourself being an artist, I like fully support that. But it's something that I often have a very hard time working within, if that makes sense.
It definitely makes sense to me. I think that there is a particular type of language that I think is often used in professional arts applications, and maybe particular language that's really celebrated or sought after in a jury process for grants. So I definitely get the concern. I have it myself around not wanting my art practice to be shaped by that framework. It makes me think about how applications can look different at different organizations and institutions. And I'm curious to know, like, it makes me think about the Media Art Scholarship at CFAT and how that is sort of like a more open to like emerging artists program. And I'm curious to know like what that experience was like for you applying for it and then like going to it, and then what happened after that. And I want to be clear that this is not like a plug for CFAT's Media Art Scholarship. I'm honestly just curious to know. You can say you don't, it didn't mean any, like, I don't care. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. I think maybe one thing that I should have also said beforehand is that I am really, and I feel like I keep saying this, but having distinctions between like, this is this thing now, and then this thing happens, and now this is this other thing now, is the same when I'm thinking about like, well, I'm an artist now and not an artist now. And I think Tara was kind of speaking towards this, is like, I'm like, I feel like that all the time. Like there's not a distinction where I'm like, now I'm making art and now I'm not making art. Like and so when it comes to writing applications, and even with the Media Art Scholarship, it's like having to turn on this other thing, and I don't really know what that is, but it feels almost like this thing that is outside of myself in a way. Though the Media Art Scholarship was actually fantastic, and I think that the opportunity was really special and was the first like and gotten and the supports were amazing. And I feel like a lot of the things that I'm thinking and saying now started kind of rolling through that process, and having that amount of time to talk to other artists who are part of the program, as well as my mentor Annie and everyone at CFAT, and just having those doors opened. Like, I think that has contributed to this feeling, but not in a negative way. It's just for my thoughts around it.
Well, Courtney, you may not be plugging it, but I will be. I just wanted to quickly say about my experience, like previous to my program, when I took it, I didn't, of course, like I said, I had all the inklings and all the desires and thoughts, ooh, film, ooh, whatever, but I didn't do anything. But when I took it, it shaped what I am today. Like it awakened everything that I am today. And my mentor was Mary Kohler. And I found out recently that she actually passed away only this April. I was pretty sad to find out, but I remember her, and oh, she was just like a second mom. And just being, that was when the CFAT was located in CPC. And now look, I created a broadcast company. And so just that's probably why I'm so close to CFAT, and CFAT so close to my heart. Like it felt like family. It truly felt like family. Like the mentor is so important. You're like relying on them for a lot, and they are there. They are truly there. And I know that their honorarium isn't that high. It's decent, but it's probably not that high. Not for the level that they give you, the level of love. But yeah, it completely shaped present. And
to add on to that, CFAT was like a great program for me. Like initially, like going into to talk about the writing part and last question, like it was interesting writing, you know, because like you're talking about what you need from the program and how a mentor will help guide you. I found that like my mentor William Robinson and the program and learning all the different techniques and technologies that I needed to do what I planning on doing and have done, yeah, like it was all facilitated like perfectly. But like I found the best thing about the whole mentorship thing or experience was that it was very validating to know that and to also see that like what I'm doing and what I'm planning and, you know, hopefully going to focus on, there's room for it, right? And there's also potential to allow it to grow and also for its voice to be heard in a weird way, I guess.
Thank you so much, all three of you, for sharing your insights and reflections on the program and how important and significant it was. Something that struck me was this, like the Media Arts Scholarship is an amazing program because one of the prerequisites is that you don't know how to do the thing you want to do. And that it sets up a very structured curriculum of teaching you all these different skills that you can then use, and like encourages like not knowing, encourages learning, encourages making mistakes, encourages making a mess. And like this really feels like something totally different compared to Tara, what you mentioned, like not going to NASCAD, not getting a formal education, and how it can be such a barrier to try to navigate the art world when you don't have that piece of paper. And so I wonder if we could riff a little bit more about how hard it is to not know or to not have like accreditation or barriers that we encounter when we don't have the right stamps or something?
yeah, let's riff. So it is a barrier because like, so I mean, now that I'm older, like I've applied for different arts related positions and have like all of the life experience and then some, and just don't have that paper. And so I felt like those particular positions, it was really looked at. And I even tried to go back to Dal through the TYP program at Dal, and I passed their initial test. But then when I got to the interview, he was like, "Well, you're already creating art. Like, why would you even go back?" Like, and I feel like inside of me, it was in my mind and heart to fill in the gaps that I thought were there. You know, because sometimes when the ones who go through school, like I just say school or the industry kind of comes to you when you're in educational programs. And so I just thought there were gaps. Like I know a lot, I network with a lot of people, you know, I have a great network and everything, but it took a lot. Like I had to show up at a lot of different places. I wasn't just sitting behind a desk and then a person presenting comes in and I meet them that way, which is still great. But I mean, man, I did a lot of walking. It was fun, but yeah, it was just harder, you know. And it's like, so I think both have merits. Grassroots is definitely takes a little longer to get your footing, but I don't regret it.
Yeah, I agree with Tara. I didn't go to art school and I haven't graduated from post-secondary school, and graduating, I felt like, oh, this is the end, just because that is what I have been told is going to happen. And I actually feel that now, having that time that that I had spent kind of trudging through the little school that I have done, it's like I have done way more with my time outside of school that feels way more grounded in my community and with the people that I care about. And I feel like I'm doing a lot of good work that doesn't really relate to anything that I learned in school, and is maybe in fact like doing the opposite of what I was learning in school. So it feels like kind of the opposite of a barrier for me. And I think that there are barriers when it comes to finding work in specific fields, but I also, for myself, believe that kind of building those things for yourself, even if it is like a long trudge, also um and there's a lot to learn from that process, and that process of learning feels way more important than what I was learning in school. And yeah, also I'm not like bashing on people going to school, because I do think that there are totally benefits to going to school and going to art school. And maybe is something that further down the line I would do, but right now it's like I feel confident in not having all of the like papers.
I definitely did. I do agree. I think my experience is a little bit different because I do have my paper or my degree in ceramics, but my degree in ceramics came a lot later in my actual like BFA program. So I kind of sped through a 4-year program in like a year and a half to try and learn what I was passionate about to like the end of like my BFA. And it's really interesting coming from that and like doing my whole entire artistic practice, because like I didn't learn how to write a grant until, like way after university, and like learning that whole process is like, a whole nutshell, and then trying to navigate that and figuring out what you're doing wrong and right. And that's interesting. And then I guess like speaking from a business side, like it's two different parts of your brain that you're using in a weird way. And yeah.
Yeah, and I think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to say, like, I'm also reminded a lot of how grants often require you to prove, like, to show that you're a professional, that they should give you money, like, do you have your degree and stuff. So then it can be really hard to like go and learn a new thing, which CFAT supports, without saying I'm already a specialist at it, I already know it. So, and yeah, I just wanted to reflect that is really, it's such a sticky double-sided thing.
Definitely. And I think it goes into that question, Julie, that you asked around like how working in the arts can be very quickly demystified when you go to open a grant application and you don't know what to do. And it's often like those sort of more like professional skills are often.
Or you're not qualified for a job.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah, and it's like the thing that Tara, you had said around feeling like this feeling of like there's gaps, and like I don't know, I may not even necessarily know what those gaps are, but I know that there's gaps. Like that's such a what a tricky feeling. I wanted to sort of pivot because I'm really curious to know what you folks think around this. Like when I think about each of your individual practices, like I do think there's like a really strong element of community in the work that you guys are each separately doing. And I'd love to know like what your experiences are in working with community and how community might inform your work. I know that also being in community can be so wonderful and fulfilling, and it can also be pretty challenging and painful at times. And I'm wondering like, yeah, how does that inform your practice?
Challenges. So I'll probably just bring up maybe my when I wrote the Viola Desmond musical. So My aim was to bring community in two ways, community through different ages. So we had actors and crew from age 5 to 65, community in terms of emerging mid-career professional artists. We had all walks. Community in terms of cultural, different ethnic and cultural backgrounds as well. So it's trying to do it all in one show. And so it was extremely lovely. The challenges, one particular one, came from my church community and had a voice. He sang from his toes, they gorgeous, big voice, and sounded great, but didn't learn the lines of his song, his one and only song for the musical on the night of the musical. And so coming together, everyone just built such a strong relationship during rehearsals and that kind of thing. The young ladies who were two of the leads, they took him back and went over his lines, before the show was starting. They coached him, they did all this. And then even, so he came through a little, with that help, that was excellent. And then there was like one particular scene that he did, and they were like running all around the stage and people were laughing because they didn't know if it was a part of the scene. And so, wow, that was something. Then we got an opportunity to do it again, and he practiced real hard because he promised me, and it turned out way better.
In terms of community, I'm kind of lucky in the sense that I kind of have two different types of community. One, like being part of like the craft community, I have that network of craft artists to kind of talk to and get feedback through that, and also just general help when, if I need it or anything like that, and more or less just bounce ideas off of. Like, the problem solving is always going to happen, and that's something. But I think one of the communities that I'm really happy to be a part of, and I felt it's also pretty validating, is like my student mate Lux and my partner Kate, who's also a student mate too. We all, in I think it was like 2018, got to be part of the Wonderneath Studio Artist Program, and I felt like moving into that community, it was really great because without it, like, one, we wouldn't have space, but like it was a new home and a new community, and like I felt that their embracement allowed like our practices to flourish. And not only that, it was super validating, and that's, as an emerging artist, that is something that you don't get that easily, so yeah.
I'm also, well, I'm not part of the studio artists at Wonderneath, but I do a lot of work at Wonderneath and also at Radstorm, which is another grassroots organization in the city, who, yeah, everything is kind of done internally, where we're writing all of our own grants, we're doing our own renovations, we're running our own programming, and it's all volunteer run except for the odd employee, who are great. And yeah, that space has one, taught me how to write grants in a way. Like, I've written more grants for Radstorm than I have for my own arts. On top of that, it's like having a space where everyone is interested in supporting, kind of what I was talking about when we were talking about self-care. It's like people are supporting themselves in a way to support the community. And one of the challenges is that when you can just burn out really fast. And if you're burnt out, then doing your own stuff is really difficult. And especially if, like, at Radstorm, we have a screen printing studio. So if part of your practice is centered in the space that you're working at and you're burnt out, it's really hard to go into the space and use it to do your own work. So I know for myself at Radstorm, that balance is super tricky, but is still, yeah, it feels like a really strong group of people, and I care and love for all of them in a way that I haven't felt in any other kind of space.
Thank you all for sharing your warm and like really generous affirmations of how central and important community is to all of your practices. I can relate in my own ways. I think that's a really nice place to maybe take our break and take a pause. So maybe what we can do now is everyone can take 5 minutes, let's go stretch, get a snack, and I invite people who have been listening so intently and energetically to reflect on what we've been talking about. And then when we come back, let's join the conversation. So if you have any questions, we would love to hear them. You can jot them in the chat, or when we come back, you can raise your hand and we can start talking together. Okay, so it's 7:19 in Jabuktuk or Halifax. Let's come back and get started again at 7:25. Okay, so just coming back to my desk and my screen, and I invite you all to do the same. Bring your snack over, settle in. Oh, wait. Oh, there's Tara. Great. Okay, so let's get into discussion. We'll go well, not as long as it feels good, but we'll go for a bit. If you have a question that you would like to ask, please either throw it in the chat and we'd be happy to read it out, or raise your hand and jump onto your mic and turn on your camera, and you can ask our wonderful panelists yourself. And maybe while people think about how they want to word their question or questions that they have, Cortney, maybe, I don't know, you or I can ask a ball rolling question.
Yeah, definitely. I think something that we were sort of alluding to in our other questions, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about this, is how has professionalism been a sort of barrier for you in your arts practice or in your endeavors in the arts? And by professionalism, what I'm thinking about are maybe some of the expectations and unrealistic expectations that are put on us, and particularly in a sort of in more Western and white supremacist centered organizations. Professionalism is often exclusionary and it leaves a lot of people behind. And I'd love to hear, has that been a barrier for you, and how has that shown up for you?
The only thing that comes to my mind right away is an opportunity that I had gotten from a large, or sort of opportunity from a large theater company that the artist director asked. They had created a internship for artist director to AD underneath them, and they, of course, they had to put out the call, but they came to me and said, "Listen, if you want it, then we'd love to see an application from you." But of course, it was an age limit on it, and I don't tell people my age. And so, and at the time that I was speaking with that AD, I had two pigtails in that made me look like I was about 25 years old, not 25. And so I told them my age, and they were like, "Oh my God, I'm so mad. I'm so mad. You can't apply. You can't apply." And it's just this whole idea of age. What do you mean? You could be emerging at 50 or 60 years old. Viola Desmond's sister graduated when she was 65 or 70 or something from Dow. And so this whole, it's just, when I was that age, the opportunities that exist now were non-existent then, and now all these opportunities are here, based on culture, based on skin color, based on the movement, all these things. Great, cool, but I can barely take advantage of any of them because I'm just not that age anymore. But I'm doing the work now. It's all coming to fruition now. So it's just, yeah, it's just still these barriers. They try to say, "Oh, we're doing this and this, and we're offering this now, and this funding's for you for this." It's not really for me. It's just for you to check off a box. And that's the harmful, hurtful thing of it all.
Thanks for sharing, Tara. Charvel or Kaz, have you encountered any barriers or issues with professionalism or languages on certain applications and jumping through hoops and stuff?
All of it. Just the whole thing. Yeah, but at the same time, it's I feel great about being able to take a perspective that's kind of looks at it in a theatrical sense, where it's just like any other business or place that is like trying to like build a thing and then sell it or present it to other people, you know, I feel like I have a good amount of distance from the thing where it never feels personal, which can maybe present some problems that aren't coming to mind, but I think my like kind of lack of trust or faith in these processes means that it's like I don't feel like I'm taking a risk by either applying to things or not getting things. And but I can see how it is hard if you're someone who like is trying to be like a career artist and is trying to make a living off of those things, how it can feel like a pretty big barrier. But it's kind of where I'm at with it.
Can I engage you a little bit on what you just said? Why have you made the choice to not be a career artist? Like, what are the values or ideas that are behind that choice?
Because I think the process of applying for grants and trying to fit myself into something else, especially, oh boy, it doesn't feel right a lot of the times. And like what I said before, of if I have a project in mind and there's something that might fit that project, and money is a barrier or time is a barrier, then it's something that I'm interested in doing. But I also know that it never goes without a hitch, and that there is always something where I'm making compromises about myself or about the thing that I'm making, or there's, you know, there are always like what's the there's always something to it that makes it feel not great to me. And maybe that's just like I need more experiences going to different places and talking to more people about these things. But I also feel okay having a job that I don't care a ton about and then getting to come home and focus completely on this thing that I love and feels very personal and like something that I need to be doing, but isn't also affiliated with like having to sit down and like write grants and kind of go through the process of that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, totally. Like, yeah, absolutely. I'm reminded, like, Cass, for example, you have a professional commercial practice as well as an artistic practice, and they're doing different things, but it might be related to this conversation.
I'm trying to think of something.
Well, I mean, like, do you do your commercial work to fund your artistic work, or do you get the same satisfaction out of both? Do they do the same thing for you, or do they do different things?
I kind of get the satisfaction out of both, but I find that depending on the topic of like, so if I'm doing more of like an artistic, more not artistic, I guess, but like more of like a conceptual work, not to say that like my functional pottery doesn't have concept to it, but if I'm doing something that has more of a theme to it and has more like Islamophobia towards it, sometimes it can get a little emotional, and depending on how strong the subject matter is. Like for me, when I was doing my CFAT narrative portion for the work that I did, I had to really like kind of bunker myself down and kind of had to re-traumatize myself in a way to like bring up all these memories and then write about them too. So I found that to be really difficult in that sort of sense, if that kind of answers. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think I think that's something that maybe that takes on different forms and different experiences, but it's certainly something that I can relate to in my own life, of kind of like opening the wound to make the work. And Charvel, I just wanted to say I love what you said around, like, I think sometimes like it's what we're talking about in this discussion around what is success and what is failure. And I think sometimes what's left out is that it's perfectly wonderful and great for some people to make art privately or like outside of their, like, that doesn't have to be their career, and that's also like a wonderful choice.
And
I saw, oh, sorry, go ahead.
And I don't think it necessarily means that it has to be private at all. Like I'm yeah, I don't feel like there are definitely parts of my practice that feel private, but huge parts of it that feel completely not private at all. But it's like my interest in making art in the first place is to be engaging with the world. And it's not. And through that, I think that any other job or work that I do is going to be infused by those values and that those kind of ideas that come up in that, and that thing is what gives me pleasure in making art. And it gets really, really complicated when you start mixing in money and money. Yeah, in a way that I'm like weary of a little bit, but I'm sure that will change at points in my life.
We have a hand up and a question there.
Yeah, I saw Francine has put her hand up first, and then we have a question from Allison after that.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for your time. It's very interesting. As an artist who's also had their patterns shift and be really disrupted, of course, in the past 8 months, as all of us have. And now you talk about, you know, this private public career, not career diamonds that were kind of turning around. I think a lot about the validation or the feedback that I get from doing my art, and those words are very specific. Am I an artist, or do I make the difference in that language, or how you identify as an artist, or are you human that makes art? Is there a difference? Is that language important?
Were you folks able to understand? There was a little bit of, the line was a bit choppy, Francine. Thank you for your question. I think if I can paraphrase, and correct me if I get this wrong, but you were asking about like, what are the distinctions between language being, am I an artist? What does that mean? Or am I a person who makes art? And like, is it about like self-identifying as an artist? And like choosing that title for ourselves and how we define that? Right, so Francine writes in the chat, am I an artist or do I make art?
I think they're synonymous with each other. There's a saying that I always share that I don't know who it came from, but it's you know, you, whatever's inside of you, if you're creating something that we call art, it's not actually for you, it's to offer the world. So it could be you know, like it's to be shared. That's what it's implanted inside of you for. Not only, of course, but you know, that's one of the things, whatever is stirring up in there needs to be shared with the world. And I look at it as like I see art in everything. I could be walking along, you know, walking along and see leaves floating on the ground, and oh my gosh, that looks like da-da-da-da's painting or whatever. Or, you know, I just see patterns in everything. So So I realized over time that that's just who I am. It's my identity, what I see. And if I choose to express that either just by smiling about it or sharing it with someone or painting it or making a documentary about other folks that see like that or whatever, then it could be called making art, but it's whatever you want to call me. It's up to the other person's perception. But I just see it as it's my identity. It's who I am. That's why I was kind of ashamed of myself for a little while, disappointed in myself for a little while for not being who I am based on what other people were saying throughout. And oh, you should go to school. You should. For what? I'm fabulous all by myself.
I kind of agree with Tara on that one in the sense that like I feel as though I do make art and I also am an artist. Like they kind of both relate to each other. When I'm working on, say, like functional pottery, for instance, one thing that I always like to consider is like if I do sell like a piece or something, it's not just a piece of ceramic. It's kind of, you're also taking a piece of me into your home to enjoy it every day, right? Because you're taking my ideas, my culture, and you're using it. So it's like you're taking a piece of me home, and you're going to enjoy that object in a way, right?
I actually do think that there is a distinction for me between these things. Because if I'm in a state where maybe I'm not making anything or I'm not feeling very creative or I'm facing some sort of block, that means in these definitions, I'm a human who is not making art. But then on that same line, if I then consider myself like I am not an artist when I'm not actively making art, it's like, well, that's a huge part of my life, and now suddenly it feels like I am not this thing that feels like a huge part of my life. Does, if that makes sense, like it's like taking away this thing that I do but just not doing right now. I hope that makes sense. I'm not sure if I'm putting that in words that do make sense. Yeah.
Totally. I think that does. I really appreciate that everyone has different perspective and has shared their ideas. I'm also reminded of this essay that I read by Alice Walker, who wrote in the early 20th century about like Western hierarchies of art and how for so long what could be called art was really narrowly categorized, had to be like a white male artist, European, and working with certain materials for that kind of creative output to be considered art. And so she writes beautifully about how her mother made art, but it was like preserves or gardens, and how different people in different parts of the world at different times, working in different kinds of like systems of access and privilege or deprivation, have just expressed their creativity different. And like, how do we learn to value it or see it? So this is such a great and important and loaded question. I'll read Allison's question in the chat and then invite the panelists to respond. So Allison writes, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how to handle the particular failure of not finishing or abandoning a project. This is something that I have found difficult psychologically. Thanks, Allison.
Yeah, a couple of examples come up, but overall, I have what I call my dirty cry. My cry in the midnight hour in front of a Netflix film or with nothing on. I sit in the dark a lot just to reflect. And you have to let it out some kind of way, whether that's through a talk, a cry, trying again, and just let yourself off the hook. Let yourself off the hook. It could be a milestone. Maybe that's your first draft. Maybe that's a draft that had to come out, and then now you're on to something new that informed or whatnot. So Yeah, so it's too many examples to mention, but that's kind of, yeah. Me.
Um, for me, one of the things, like recently, we in the business side of things, like or the ceramic functional side, I've been dealing where some of my kilns have lost like 30% of the stuff that have come out, and that's kind of a lot from there to there. And one of the things that I think plagues ceramic artists is trying to figure out the failure, and like, you know, trying to rack your brain around what am I doing wrong, and then, you know, how can I kind of fix that going forward. So I think for me, how I kind of suffer when things don't go wrong is, or go right, well, yeah, I just have to kind of figure it out, and like I'll spend hours and hours trying to do it.
I think that sometimes if you can't finish a project, or there's something that is blocking it from finishing, you just need to put it down and step away from it. And maybe that's forever, but maybe that's also only, you know, a day or a week or a month. And going into that time not putting any sort of judgment on what that means. And I think that's a really hard thing to do, to put something down and be like, it's okay if I step away from this thing for a while. Like, that doesn't mean that I can't do this thing, or that this thing isn't going to, you know, continue on in some way. And then revisiting it later can really help for me. And that piece then often for me becomes a completely different thing, because it's in a different environment under different context. But that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. It just becomes part of how you change and how you adapt as an artist. But at the same time, I do think that sometimes it is like, for me, it has been really important to just push through a project and just be like, I just need to finish this. And sometimes it doesn't have to be the thing that you initially envisioned, and just getting it out into the world, or just like even just for your own personal, you know, getting that thing out for you personally, that can be a huge help too, to just like have a thing, get it out, and then let it go. Or else, for me, I find that I can ruminate on those things forever, and I have piles of things that are not finished. I feel like most of the things that I do are half done, but then it's always been really good to come back to those things.
Love that. Thanks for sharing that. Angel has asked a question in the chat I'm going to read out. How have you managed navigating systems within the art world that often force us into boxes and create divisions between practices, when a lot of your practices, from what I can tell, are really interdisciplinary? Are there ways you divide or combine practices to give yourself space outside of boxes we need to check on a grant or job application?
Totally. I sometimes call myself an analytical artist. So all that means is that all of my artistic administrative experience informs the writing of grants. So one thing someone told me a while back was that, you know, just like a job interview, your grant application rationale is like an interview. You do all these fancy things, and you say all the best things about yourself, and you say, you know, all these things to get that job, to get that grant. And then when you get that funding, I mean, obviously, yeah, you do what you said the funding was for, but like you're just like, okay, breather now. Like, you just did this whole song and dance for them just to get this funding. And like, sometimes you feel like you're selling your daggone soul for a minute. but because just like Kaz mentioned earlier about, you know, like when you buy my art, you're buying me. It's the same thing. So like if that grant gets rejected, I feel like you're rejecting me. You know, if it gets approved, then oh, what, I'm worth something, you know. But so you have to try to like only just listen to a tiny bit of that and put it away when it needs to be put away. So yeah.
Just in the way that you're phrasing that question, I guess my answer is kind of like not putting all of your eggs in one basket. And I don't like really looking at it in those terms, but I think that, yeah, I might sit on that one a little bit. I'm not sure if I agree with what I'm going to say.
I find for me, because like I do work in a medium that's craft. When it comes time to like say checking the box for craft versus like why not do it? Why do I not check it for like interdisciplinary or visual art, for instance? I think the craft kind of still relates to it. It's just that I just like if I'm writing a grant, for instance, I have to justify why this multimedia installation plus my craft work is justified, right? And through that, that's how I'm kind of able to kind of make it work in a way, I guess. And I think that's what's worked for me. And it's really interesting. I remember talking with another artist a long time ago, and they said that when they are on juries for specific grants, they will heavily grade a grant based on how it's like so if instead of saying say you're doing a craft medium but you label yourself as a visual artist, and that person would grade them as a visual artist opposed to looking at it as a craft. And they would say that if you're looking at it as a craft, they would look at it in a totally different manner, and they'd merit it either higher or lower based on that. So I always thought that was really interesting to kind of learn from that and also kind of think about that when I do things as well.
Thank you all so much for your answers, and thank you to everyone who's here for really great questions. I'm looking at the clock and mindful that we've been sitting and looking at screens for a really long time. I think we've had an amazing conversation this evening. I'm really grateful to our panelists for their thoughtfulness, their warmth, their generosity. Thank you so much, Tara, Charvel, and Kaz, and Courtney, of course. This has been really wonderful, and I'm glad to have had this time with you all. And to everyone who came out to listen and participate, thank you to you too. Yeah, Courtney, any last words? Any panelists, any last words?
I'd like to say as well a big thank you to our interpreters, Ioka and Carmel, as well as our closed captioning provider tonight, Casey. Thank you very much. I'd love if any of the panelists wanted to say any last words, please feel free. But I wanted to invite you folks to add if you have a website or some kind of place on the internet, if people want to get in touch with you or check out your work, feel free to add it to the group chat now. Otherwise, I'm going to hang out for a little bit as people kind of trickle away, but please feel free to give me a shout if you have any questions about the series or CFAT or the program we talked about. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Courtney and Julie and Cass and Tara and the interpreters.
Thanks everybody. Thanks Ethan. Thanks Julie. Thanks Tara, and thanks Charvel.
Thank you, you gorgeous panelists and you gorgeous interpreters and you gorgeous facilitators. Everyone's so lovely, so respectful. I love it. Thank you, audience. Love you.
Okay, I'm going to shut it down.
Great.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.